Okay, just want to give a general case review, a simple, straightforward case, how we go from implant planning from a crown down perspective to building a surgical guide. So this is the patient's CT scan. Chief complaint is missing of the number 18, 19 teeth on the lower left side. Just of note, we have here a tipped over molar, so we're going to want to just take a look at this and see what we could do to make the situation better. Okay, so first thing we're going to do is we're going to trace our nerves. This can be done with the auto detect nerve button, and that will see where it deviates slightly here, but that's pretty much dead on. So we will then, once we have a nerve set up, we can then look at what is our space between our nerve and our bone. So we have a indentation here from the sublingual gland. So we've got to take that into account in terms of where our implants are going to be. Our bottom point is no longer going to be the nerve, it's going to be this undercut. And the anterior space looks like we have decent size and we have good room to the nerve. Okay. One of the new features of the Blue Sky plan is the ability to segment out a jaw automatically. And I didn't quite appreciate how helpful that is until it started becoming an automatic feature, because the segment individually is very time consuming. But once we do have it, as the AI can do it automatically now, it's really a huge help. So all you have to do is hit auto segmentation of both either the maxilla or the mandible. Here our focus is really just the mandible. And I'll just turn all that on for now. And just to see what it shows us. So it segments out the lower jaw, segments out all the teeth individually, and it really does a fantastic job. This will allow us to better see where the bone is in the 3D view as well, not just in the 2D views, and very helpful for treatment planning. All I'll then do is take the intraoral scans that I've taken, and I'll overlay that. It's also a simple drag and drop, and the AI will match everything extraordinarily well. We'll double check the outline of the tooth, and so I'm looking at here, see the green line, how closely does that hug the tooth. That's what's going to tell me how good my mesh is. We've done pretty well here. I will then bring in the maxilla, not so much to mesh with the top maxilla, but only to see in occlusion where I am. At that point I can turn off the CT 3D view because now it's superfluous, it's not as clear. So I've got my upper teeth in occlusion. And the way we'll do that is just when you drag and drop it in, rather than dragging and dropping it and asking it to auto merge it, because then it'll auto merge to the top teeth, what we'll do is we'll go to the models and you'll link it to model, and you'll link it to the lower set of teeth and hit OK, but do not click align with points, just click OK, and that will give us our alignment here. Good. So once we have that, we can start to do a general wax up of where the teeth will go, and then from there, we'll be able to plan our implants. So I did a general wax up here, and we can see more or less where those teeth will sit. When I have these angled molars, which is very common, this tooth is actually in occlusion, this wisdom tooth, so we're going to keep it. But what I prefer to do in these cases is rather than just leave this tooth as is, because this will be, you can see it clear on this view, this will be a large undercut in terms of a food trap. You can see the soft tissue levels, like this green line, are right about here. So what I'll do is I'll shave off about 1 millimeter or 2 off this crown that's on the posterior. That will give me two things. It'll both give me space and give me a broader contact point. Both will be helpful for no longer causing a food impaction there. So if you see here, I made this tooth a little bit bigger than the tooth is now, because I plan on prepping that tooth down and leveling that off slightly. So we've got our teeth in occlusion, and now we can plan our implants. So our front implant, I've chosen a 4.3 by 10, and we're going to go from Model Master now to Advanced. And you can just do Advanced or Normal, it just gives you more or less buttons. I prefer the Advanced, but if there are too many buttons it's confusing, you can just stick with the Normal. And apply my implants. I always like them to be slightly subosseous for two reasons. One, to bury the implant away from the bacteria. Second, I'd like it to have a greater emergence profile to be able to give this tooth a good emergence profile and a wide molar space. So the best way to do that is to give the lab some running room to create it. So I'll drop that a couple millimeters subosseous. Make sure we're clear of the nerve, which we are. Can measure it down exactly here. We're at 1.5, so we can bring this up a drop. Or that gives us the 2. Let's bring it back down closer to 2. That seems about right. My exit point is right by the central fossa, so that's about where I want it to be as well. Good, so we're in good shape there. If you're at all concerned for spacing, you could always turn this into an 8mm implant, but I don't think it's necessary here. And our second implant, again, is the limiting factor here is the undercut. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring this tooth in a little bit more. And again, I'm plenty of room for the nerve. The nerve space here is not about 4mm away. But the undercut, if I have an 8mm implant here, so let's say we switch to a 5x8, I'm going to be puncturing the lingual floor, and we've got the lingual nerve and artery running through this area, so we definitely don't want to do that. So I'm just hitting Control Z here, and we go back to the 5.0 by 6mm implant. Let's just line things up a little bit nicer here in terms of my implants. This one's a little bit more on the buccal side. Let's bring a drop more lingual. And this implant on the mesial is probably a little bit over on the lingual side, so we're going to angle that slightly buccal. Excellent. If we'd like, a nice feature here we could do is to make the implants exactly parallel. So what we'll do is I'll right click on the implant and I'll say align with implant, and then click on the implant, and that just made them 100% parallel. You see it brought me out a little bit more buccal than I was before. But we're 100% parallel. Let's see if I could give a little bit to keep the parallelism. Although we're still in good shape there. You know what, we'll leave it alone. Okay, so now we've got our prosthetic setup, our implant setup, taking into account all the anatomical landmarks. We have good bone, we have good stability here in the bone. Although it's a 6mm implant, although this could be kept separate, especially in protected occlusion with a wisdom tooth behind it. I know some people like to splint them prosthetically. Either will work well. And now let's build ourselves a guide. So the only surface we need for the guide is the actual STL file. We can turn off the prosthetic teeth. And then we will turn on, we're going to be on Blue Sky Bio fully guided surgical kit. I'll turn on the guide tubes. And the guide tubes are not intersecting with each other, but if you see this one, this is not going to seat until I actually prep that part of the tooth off. So prior to seating this guide, we got to level that tooth off by a couple of millimeters. Then the guide will be able to seat. Until then, the guide will not seat. So there'll be an extra reminder to level that off prior to starting the surgery. Okay, then we just go to guide panel. We hit draw curve. So it's telling me I've got a collision, but say do nothing, I got this covered, because I plan on prepping that away as soon as I go to seat my guide. And then we'll just draw a curve here. Excellent. And as I've shown before, I like to add windows to the ends of these. And I'll show you why. I'll add one and not the other on the first run. That looks about right. And we'll go hit create surgical guide. It's probably a little too thin here. I'm going to remake that and make that push back a little bit more. But just the point I'm showing here is that I've got a clean edge. When I seat this guide, I want to be able to see a clean edge to make sure I'm fully seated, as opposed to the natural default is going to kind of bleed over. Sometimes it'll give you a clean edge, sometimes a little bit less clear. So let's just redo this. So we'll switch back to the mandible surface. I'm going to hide that. Guide panel. And go back to drawing the curve. It's going to give me my same draw that I had. I'm going to show windows, and all I'm going to do is pull this back a couple of millimeters, just so it's not so thin at that point. I'm going to add another window here for that same purpose, just to give you a clean slice at the end of that. Beautiful, and create surgical guide. All right, so I got a little more material here. That's not going to be a break point. I've got a clean slice on both sides. Excellent. And as always, we can put in any text that we want and a reminder of the size of the implant. We just type in, let's say, patient initials. And the size is based on how far you're zoomed in. I just hit apply text, and that will apply that text. In this case, I'm not going to need that. And that's pretty much it. We can go to export, save surgical guide, and it'll deduct an export from us, and we've got our case ready to go. Hope that was helpful. As always, feel free to drop in the comments or shoot me an email with any questions, and happy guiding.